Good evening and a welcome to our webinar this evening, which we are going to talk about the changes to the dairy standards that are coming after the 1st of October. Just a little bit of housekeeping. You are all set to mute, so I can't actually hear you if you have a question. You will see that there is a space for questions on your screen if you're watching on a laptop. Feel free to fire questions in there, and we will hope to answer some of those at the end of the presentation. If you are watching this webinar on a iPad, I understand that there is a question mark on the right hand side of the screen, and you answer your questions that way. The webinar will be online after we have this evening's presentation, and I will be sending that out to all our dairy scheme members and tweeting it out online. I'm just letting some folk join the webinar here. Our numbers are going up a little bit. And don't forget that you can log this with Dairy Pro if you are a member. If you want to contact them, you will gain a point for some training, and you can put this in your training log that you have at home on farm. I probably should have said my name is Debbie Smith. I'm the scheme member manager here at Red Tractor, and I am just about to hand over to my colleague Kate Cross, who is the technical manager. She looks after our dairy and beef and lamb schemes. Some of you may know Kate, some of you may not, but as I said, feel free to submit any questions as we go through the presentation, and we will endeavour to answer them at the end. So without further ado, I will hand over to Kate, who will take you through her presentation on the standard changes.
So good evening, everybody. We're just having a slight technical here, getting Debbie to switch her speakers off, otherwise we're going to have feedback. There we go, Debbie switched her speakers off. So good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us this evening for our brief, she says. Debbie will kick me if I go on too long. Hopefully we'll keep you about half an hour, go through some of the standard changes that are due to come in, as Debbie said, on the 1st of October with your Red Tractor dairy standards. So without further ado, let's look at some time why we changed Red Tractor standards and where we're coming from. So as you will all be aware, working within the industry, we have standards in place, and we set them looking at a number of criteria. We look at the food safety elements, traceability and origin, animal health and welfare, and environmental protection. And this is what our consumers expect of us. They expect us to produce a product for them to consume with the logo on it, and that we've taken account of all these elements of it in the background. There is one other area that is coming in, and it already is in the fresh produce area, but something we do need to take account of across the sectors, and that's worker welfare. There's no changes within this standard change that comes in on the 1st of October regarding worker welfare, but as you'll be aware, we do have to take account of the way the industry is moving as we go forward. So who makes the decisions on what standards to put in and how we word them? At Red Tractor, we have a number of people that we work with, and committees and boards. But in terms of setting the technical strategy, we have what's known as the Technical Advisory Committee, who meet to discuss where the industry is going and what standards we need to put in. That group is made up of dairy farmers, industry representatives from industry bodies, milk buyers, vets, health and welfare experts, technical personnel from levy bodies, etc. And we all come together and we discuss where we believe these standards need to address and what elements. So how often does this happen? Every 3 years we do a review of all the standards. Now those of you that are good People like I am and have a set of the dairy standards, the green dairy standards booklets alongside your bed, will know that the last review, which was version 4, actually came out on the 1st of October 2017. And 3 years in 2017 does not take us to the 1st of October 2019. But what we've got to is, we believe as the Technical Advisory Committee and the Red Tractor Dairy Board that there is a requirement for these standards to come in earlier, because of the way the industry is going and the way that our consumers are expecting us to address certain elements. Back in June, we had a number of potential standard changes that we put out to industry consultation. That was put together and emailed out to all our members that we have email addresses for comments, again, represented bodies, etc. We gave them a time window to collate all those responses. We went through each and every response, and thank you if you are on this evening's call and you did take the time to feed into that consultation process. We took the feedback and we have then come up with the final set of standards that will be implemented from the 1st of October. But do bear in mind, we are in continuous engagement with stakeholders, so that's including your milk buyers, farming unions, etc., about how we can ensure that these messages about the standard changes get out to people, so that all members are aware of the changes and how they may affect their forthcoming assessment visits. So timelines. So version 4.2, as I said, version 4, which was a big version change, came out on the 1st of October 2017. Version 4.2 will be assessed against from the 1st of October 2019. As I said, we did the consultation process and that came to a conclusion and went to the board for agreement. And so the actual agreement to the final changes was in early August. In the week commencing the 12th of August, all dairy members should have got a hard copy of a newsletter, a 4-page newsletter, which was a summary of the changes that was happening in the post. That said, it has a summary of the changes and directed you to a full change document that we have hosted on our website. And the plan for this evening is to go through those changes and just explain a little bit more what sits behind them and where the templates, etc., can be found to aid you as you go through your assessments going forward. As I said, rest assured we are working with industry to ensure that people are aware of these changes, where they can get help, advice, find the templates that they may need for to add in certain things to the current documentation and processes that they already run on farm. So we've got this evening's webinar. Some of you may have been up in Telford yesterday in that very warm building for UK Dairy Day, where we were engaging with members. We are working with AHDB and the NFU, looking to go out to farmer meetings, doing some vet meetings as well, out and about. We're talking to the trade press. So this presentation was done yesterday at UK Dairy Day, or a similar presentation, and we spoke to the trade press. So we do expect to see something both in the monthly and the weekly trade press about the changes. And we are working with milk buyers, because at the end of the day, you're all producing a product. You all have a purchaser that's picking your milk up, and you know, we're working with them about their newsletters, etc., that go out to ensure that the messages are in there, and they can direct you as well to the different resources that are available to you to help you. So, what's changing? That's the only reason you've joined us this evening, rather than watching EastEnders or Emmerdale or whatever is on the telly at this time of an evening. So we'll start with the easy ones. There's a couple of wording changes that have gone on within the document. If you look within your standards, currently the section that is called CR is artificially reared young stock. We're dropping the word artificially. It is now just the young stock sector. No other changes in terms of to the standards there, but it does actually reflect what we're talking about. We're not just talking about artificially reared calves, we're talking about all the young stock on the farm. So that starts, you know, the moment it drops from its dam. We're looking at the colostrum policy, etc., but we'll talk about that a bit more in the health planning side of things. Within the staff and labour providers section, which is the SC section within your standards, we have changed the wording there. Previous versions have talked about members of staff, but we have a recognition that these standards apply across the board, regardless of whether it's a family-only farm or a site that employs personnel. So there's the recommendation that at least one person per site is a member of a scheme that records skills and development or training. Debbie made mention earlier that if you are a member of Dairy Pro, please do ensure you register tonight's attendance for your Dairy Pro point on that. The other wording change that is occurring, we have a recommendation within our standards that milking time tests, dynamic milking tests are undertaken. The industry terminology for these has actually changed, so we've been working with various organisations that undertake these, and the wording change is that it's now a milking time test. It's exactly the same test, it's exactly the same setup, but it's just the wording that's a change there. We have removed some recommendations. They are maybe picked up in the other standards, but it is worth just noting there are a number of recommendations that have been removed. So MP stands for milk production. There was a recommendation in there that a site has a generator. We no longer have that there needs to physically be a generator on site. We expect this to be covered in the emergency plan. There's a couple of recommendations relating to colostrum. In there was a recommendation about being delivered to the calf within 2 hours, and 10% or 3 litres is given as a first feed. And then we also had one on mobility scoring at least once every 6 months. These are now incorporated into the herd health plan. So we're saying that within the herd health plan, you'd have a colostrum policy that would detail how much colostrum the calves are getting at what time period, etc. Similarly, you'll have a foot care and lameness policy, which we'll talk about if and when you do mobility scoring, how you use the scores, etc., who's responsible. So as I said, they'll all be detailed in the herd health plan. The other one that we have taken out, again, it was a recommendation, and that was about the tank having your bulk tank having an alarm and a temperature logger. We are aware of the fact there are different types of loggers and alarms out there. We are working with the industry to say, well, what do we need to do? What do these need to address for food safety as much as anything? And then we can maybe look at that going forward. But at the moment, that recommendation has been taken out of our standards. So moving on to the actual standards that have changed. Some of them are just wording changes. Just, she says, I know it sounds hard, but it is actually, there are wording changes in there, and there are some new standards. There's a recommendation that's moved to a standard, but we'll talk through those. So the first one is the documentation. We say that a documented plan for effective management of serious incidents and potential emergency situations is on farm. This is already in the standards, it's already there, you'd already expect to have one to be compliant with the standards. What we have changed is that this must be displayed in a position available to all those involved in farm tasks. There is also a few additions to what this document needs to address. So I mentioned that we've taken out the recommendation about having a generator. But we would expect the emergency plan to detail what happens if there is a loss of power, in terms of how the bulk tank, the milk cooling will occur, how we'll ensure that the health and welfare of the stock is maintained. There is also, we'd expect in there to cover off what happens if you do lose your assurance status. So what would your plan be for any milk that's unassured, or if you lost the status for cows to be sent in as unassured, etc. So that's also be covered off in the emergency plan. I said we expect it to be displayed. I know many of you will have these available already, and they might be available in a folder in the house when the assessor comes and you bring it out. We'd expect them to be displayed on the farm and expect them to see while we're walking around the farm. So, you know, a laminated copy in the dairy, in the office, in the broom, if you have one, etc., is probably where we'd expect that to see as the assessors. The next amends, if you will, it's a standard that's already in the documentation, and that's again relating to antibiotic failures. At the moment, it currently says that if the farm has 2 or more antibiotic failures in a rolling 12-month period, it must be reported to the vet. We've actually changed the wording of this, that the prescribing vet must be informed of each antibiotic failure. So if you have an antibiotic failure, you have to inform the prescribing vet of this. We do have a form available through BCVA, which will help look at that, and I do have a quick snapshot of that in a moment, which will help you. How will it work? Because obviously at the moment we're going from a standard that's already in the document, and you'll be measured against. So if you have your assessment visit, say on the 12th of October, and you had an antibiotic failure in May, and only the one antibiotic failure, we'd expect that to be written in your complaints log that you've had an antibiotic failure, but we wouldn't raise a non-conformance should you not have had a vet investigation for that May failure. Should you have your visit on the 12th of October, you had an antibiotic failure on the 1st of October, we would expect that to be reported to the vet. Again, it would be in your complaints register, but we'd also expect the vet's investigation to be done. Why are we doing this? As you know, there's quite a lot of work being done within the industry, within the sector, and the wider agricultural industry regarding antibiotics, antibiotic use, etc. So we need to ensure that we look at that, and the vet being involved with each antibiotic failure will aid with that annual reviews discussion and actually determining why it has occurred. Any of you that have done the milk show course, which will get mentioned again later on, there's a nice bit in there in the documentation about the percentage of antibiotic failures that aren't actually what we all assume they are. It wasn't that cow, it may be a different cow that actually is caused the antibiotic failure. And the vets who are prescribing the drugs need to know if there's any potential issues, if there's maybe a training issue that we're not looking at, etc., and picked up. So that there's just a snapshot. The BCVA do have a report form that will be available on our website to be used by the vets to say that they've done an investigation. It is a 4-page document, but there's different elements to it. The vet will determine which elements they need to complete, whether or not a full investigation, etc., needs to be done. Now, some of you out there will say, well, the milk buyer already does this. As I mentioned earlier, we have milk buyers, etc., sitting on our TAC. We as Red Tractor sit on the Dairy UK milk residuals group, and the discussion is this, by virtue of the fact that every failure has been reported to the vet, means that we should avoid duplication being done, whether the dairy having to do an investigation, the vet doing an investigation, it will all come together. So hopefully reducing duplication as we go through. Another standard that hasn't changed is MPI and 0.1, and that is the standard is the same, but there is an additional requirement in there. The standard is that the parlour is clean, and but what we're saying here is we're not talking about the clusters, the pipework, etc. Yes, they all need to be clean. That does not change, but we've added in a requirement that there's a detailed plant cleaning protocol available, and again on display, including the stages of wash and final rinse, the products that are being used, the dilution rates, etc. for them, and how often checks are undertaken. This additional requirement is for all types of parlours, so automatic, robotic parlours, etc. Same again, if you've got an automated wash system, you walk out the parlour, you press the green button, switch the radio off, go and feed the calves, and the parlour does its own thing. We need to look at how often the calibration happens there, what the dilution rate is for the chemicals, etc. So all that will expected to be seen in the detailed cleaning protocol. There will be a template on the website showing what needs to be covered in the next few days. We're just working with industry to make sure we've covered everything and the terminology. It is a table format set up for the template, saying the different stages that you use, and you'll be able to determine, if your system does that. We do ask how often an acid wash is done, etc. in there. But again, the template's being produced to help you to ensure that you've got the details available to you there. I mentioned earlier that there was a recommendation that's actually gone to full standard, and this is the one about administering medicines. Thank you to those of you. We've had this as a recommendation now since 2017, and thank you to those of you that have worked with the industry, be it with your local vets or discussion groups, etc., and undertaken a training course on administering medicines. We're not just talking about putting a needle in a cow, we're talking about use of medicines, understanding what types of medicines, why maybe the high percentage of vaccines aren't working in the industry, etc. So we've brought in this standard that at least one person who's responsible for administering medicines has undertaken a training course and holds a certificate of competence from training undertaken since October 2016. So if you've undertaken a course with your vet, etc., in the last 3 years and you've got the certificate to show that, great. That does help us on that side of things. And what we're saying the medicine course has to cover is different types of medicine, handling, storage, how you'd actually administer, the difference between subcutaneous and intramuscular, etc. The recording requirements of different products and ensuring that we're keeping the right records. And as always, avoiding residues. How do we ensure we're sticking to what the data sheets tell us we should be doing, what cascade use, etc. sits in. How will that actually be assessed on farm? Because it does put there one person who's responsible for administering medicines. The assessor will be looking at the medicine book to see what name occurs in there, and if there's a certificate that they're presented with sits alongside the names that are seen in that medicine book. So I would encourage you, if you maybe are the main person that's doing a lot of administering and you haven't got a certificate, it's a good opportunity to get up to speed with all the industry developments, etc., that are ongoing. We as Red Tractor are working closely with training providers to ensure that the courses do cover the 6 elements we've requested they cover. This will aid yourself in ensuring that the course you do does comply and does cover what we are asking for. And it is mentioned in the standards a number of courses that are already out there. So city and guilds, only today we had an email in the office about the opportunities available for e-learning to do the Safe Use of Medicines course, part of the City and Guilds course. Lantra have an antimicrobial best practice online course available. Milksure, we've been working with Owen and Dairy UK to develop that, to ensure that that covers all the elements we're looking for in terms of the vaccination side of it, etc. I know many of you people have said to date it's talked about milk residues. It has been developed to cover more elements, and it does cover all the elements we're looking for. And we know that there are a number of vet-led courses out there, and courses being delivered with vet practices by pharmaceutical companies that cover all the elements as well. I myself went to one a couple of weeks ago, just over 100 of us on a farm one evening, and we covered all the elements. And it was good to hear, you know, those of us that are a bit long in the tooth like myself, that maybe doing it for a few years, say we can all learn something, and that's what we're looking to do with this one. Like I said, the industry's moving forward, and we as producers have a role to play to ensure that we are able to show to our consumers that we are engaging with that side of things. The next one, AMF, for those of you that don't eat, sleep and breathe, the standards, this is the medicine records and recording requirements. We have added in that teat sealants must be recorded within the medicine records use. So obviously we're already recording all vaccines, anaesthetic, etc. that's being used on the farm, and that should be in your medicine book. We're now saying that teat sealant must be recorded in there as well. Teat sealants does have a withdrawal period once a cow's calved, in terms of, you know, colostrum shouldn't be into the milk tanks. Putting the teat sealant in there in the medicine records helps us with mass balances, understanding what products are being used and where they're being used. So any use from the 1st of October needs to be recorded, and also in your medicine purchase records. If you dry a load of cows off on the 28th of September, best practice would be you would record it. But if it's not in the medicine book when you come to have your assessment visit, it won't be raised as non-conformance. But if you dried a number of cows off on the 3rd of October and they weren't in your medicine book, it would be raised as a non-conformance. We have already updated the templates that are available on our website to show this, to remind people that teat sealants must be recorded in the medicine book as well. I will remind everybody that not all medicine books are equal, so do ensure that you may be using one that does have all the columns we need, that it records both withdrawal end date and number of days. You record who administered the medicine and the reason for treatment. I said not all medicine books are equal, but do take a look at your standards just to see what needs to be recorded in there. The next addition is the annual review. Obviously, for a number of years now, we've had in that we sit down with our vets and do the annual review of health and performance data alongside the medicine book, the herd health plan, etc. We've added in there that any cascade or off-label use, cascade being the correct term, if you will, for off-label use, is looked into, and recommendations are also made for any alternative disease prevention strategies that the farm may work with. I will mention Johne's and BBD in a moment, but that is also being covered in there. They would also look at preventative treatments that maybe being made, and if there are, again, alternative prevention strategies in there. Again, that being maybe biosecurity policy if you're buying in stock, etc., and the isolation facilities you're having there, and maybe if you do that rather than preventative treatment. But we need to address this as part of the annual review. So the annual review stays; it's just the points that the vet discusses with you. We've added a couple in there to ensure that we get best value out of those meetings and we take the industry and businesses forward. As mentioned earlier, it will include the review of any antibiotic failures as well. And by virtue of the fact they're being done much nearer to the time that they actually occurred, we can get much more value and help to the business to ensure that we minimise the number of antibiotic failures that we have going through the industry. Next, another animal medicine one, and this is looking at husbandry tasks, particularly relating to young stock. So the standard itself hasn't changed. There is within the document an appendix about timelines when husbandry tasks must be undertaken, within age range, who must do them, etc. But one thing that we have brought in is that is cauterizing paste. It's already stated that it can only be used in animals under 1 week of age, so there's no change there. But we have brought in that the calf must receive pain relief. This pain relief must be recorded in the medicine book and in discussion with your vet, because this will be in the herd health plan, what type of pain relief those animals need, be it long or short acting, non-steroidals, anaesthetic, etc. Again, discussions with your vet about the best use of that. So if you are using cauterizing paste, and I know there's many people out there that have perfectly good protocols already in place, it's just about bringing in the fact that those calves must receive pain relief and that it's recorded in the medicine book. The biggie, any of you that have looked at the document that's online with the changes document, and any of you that did take the time to look at the consultation, the health plans. The wording for the health plan is different than it went out to consultation. We've had quite a lot of feedback on the wording that went out to consultation, and what we've the wording now is it's written and updated in conjunction with the vet to proactively manage and improve health and welfare of the stock. So every farm already, as part of the standards, has a health plan. What we're saying now is it's written and updated in conjunction with the vet. This doesn't mean the vet is the only person that can write it. You as farmers just know about your farm, you know the detail of your farm and what policies you're actually undertaking. But the vet signs and dates the health plan to say they're in agreement with the detail contained in the document in respect of being relevant to that farm, and they discuss the various elements with the member. The bit at the top is very much key behind the work that the TAC, the Red Tractor Board, and ourselves as technical managers live by, and that is that this document should be a live document. It's about what actually occurs on that farm and how we look after health and welfare of those stock. What we don't want it to be is seen by anybody that I'm going to put in there what I think the assessor, what Red Tractor wants to see. It's about what actually happens on your farm. How do you manage your stock, the health and welfare of your stock, etc. We've mentioned that it's written in conjunction with the vet and the vet must sign it. Now, a vet can refuse to sign it if they do not believe that the detail that's presented in that document is not in line with what the practices on the farm actually are. So again, it goes back to being a live document. Or if at the annual review changes have been suggested that need to be made, or things have changed on the farm, you know, you've gone from using cauterizing paste to disbudding with a hot iron, etc. They can refuse to sign it if they do not believe it reflects what's happening on that farm, or it misses items that have been discussed at previous annual reviews. Like I said earlier, the annual reviews is about making best use of the data and getting the best out of that time and that review to take the business forward. The next slide, I apologise, like this one is quite busy, but the little bits in red are the ones that are the main changes. So there was already an appendix within the green book of what the health plan must include. We have taken, it previously said foot care, we've added in lameness management. So I mentioned earlier mobility scoring, that's where we'd expect that to be recorded, how often you do mobility scoring, what you do, how long after a cow's been identified as a score 2 she's picked up, you know, what you do for A&E type foot trimming, what routine visits or what routine trimmings done, etc. That'll be in the foot care and lameness management. Carving procedures have been added in. So this is about when you make a decision to intervene to help with carving, where the carving aid is maybe stored, and cleanliness of that, thinking about the potential disease risks from unhygienic carving aids and carving procedures, etc. Mentioned earlier the pain relief procedures. So we mentioned cauterizing paste, disbudding, the anaesthetic that's used, also other elements that might need pain relief, you know, an assisted carving, etc. When would you use pain relief? And the other one is the use of shackles and hobbles on the cattle, not just on the farm, but actually on the cattle. I'm not sure how else people might use them, but I was told to point that out. This isn't about, you know, we're not saying how long you mustn't leave them on any longer than X date, etc. It's about recording the date those went onto that animal, how long after she's been put on are we checking to make sure that they're loose enough, etc. So there's a protocol there. We are pulling together the template for this and guidance on what elements they need to cover. Again, the document that's already on the website does have that guidance in there, but the template will have sections, if you will, to add those details in. We're coming towards the end, I promise. Johne's disease management, it's a new standard that's brought in there. Johne's disease is and should be included in your herd health plan for your endemic diseases, but we're now asking that each farm has a disease, that Johne's disease is managed through implementation of the National Johne's Management Plan. Many of you will probably already be with your milk buyer, will ask you to sign the annual declaration, and this covers that standard, if you will. Some of you may not have done that with your milk buyer to date, but there is resources out there to help you and working with your vet to do this. So we'd expect each farm to have a signed declaration that they are managing the disease through the National Johne's Management Plan. And this would be the declaration signed by the accredited veterinary advisor. The star that's on that slide is we have a 12-month derogation. So in Northern Ireland, this standard will not be assessed until the 1st of October 2020, because at the moment, Northern Ireland is not involved with the National Johne's action plan that's currently taking place. There are some vets trained over there, but they're not actually involved. And what is occurring at the moment is that Animal Health and Welfare Northern Ireland are working closely with the vets in Northern Ireland to develop a scheme. And they're working with Dairy UK and National Johne's Action Plan to work on equivalence for the scheme. So that's ongoing. If you are in Northern Ireland and you have we'd expect you to have a Johne's element within your herd health plan. If you're already signed up to the National Johne's Action Plan and you've decided which strategy you're undertaking, you know, please do present the declaration to your assessor. But we have got that 12-month derogation in place on that. As I said, there's lots of resources out there. This is a screenshot I took literally at 6:45 from the National Johne's Action Plan website, showing where all the accredited vets are. Again, encourage you to talk to your own vet practice about Johne's, and they'll be able to tell you if they have an accredited vet that can sign your declaration, etc. on that one. The next one, again, an endemic disease that it's quite a bit of industry initiative around, and that is that BVD must be managed through an eradication programme, again in conjunction with the vet. So it would be detailed in your herd health plan, and this is where the details would be. It could be, and for those of you that are in Northern Ireland and Scotland, you already have a national scheme that you have to comply with. You have to have all calves tested or blood test the herd to have a status, etc., depending on which country you're in. But that would be evidence, if you will, when the assessor comes out to say that you are part of the national scheme and you are complying with those schemes. So if your scheme says that if you have a PI, it has to be removed, you evidence that you have removed that PI, etc. If in your herd health plan you've written that you tag and test all your calves with BVD, the assessor would expect to see evidence that those calves have been tag and tested, the results that have come back, etc., and what's being done. BVD is something that we know is the devolved nations are all working slightly different on it, and we are working with the certification bodies and the assessors to ensure that we're assessing this the same across all the devolved nations, and that no one is unfairly against if they're not part of a national scheme, etc. So it might be that you're part of BVD Free England, you're part of a Checks accredited scheme, etc. But we'll be looking for those details as well as what's in the herd health plan. Again, going back to Johne's, again, best practice is already in the standards about recommendation that waste milk is not fed to calves, and that recommendation hasn't changed. The one thing that we have brought in is the standard that colostrum or milk from known Johne's positive cows must not be fed to dairy or beef breeding stock. So how would we look at this? Again, details will be within your colostrum policy. You detail in your colostrum policy the quality, quantity, and time with which colostrum is given to calves. What would you do if a dam didn't have any colostrum available? Do you have powdered, etc.? Within the policy, we'd expect to see what you would do about a Johne's positive cow. The ID for known Johne's positive animals would be recorded and available. Many of you probably work along the lines of the red tags, and then she'd flag up on the calving records that she's Johne's positive, maybe snatch calf, and then what provision you'd actually give to those calves for colostrum, etc., what's available, and also what you do with the milk from that cow, the colostrum from that cow, etc., that it being the policy that it's dumped, if you will. So those are the changes. Yes, I do agree that there is a number, quite a few of them are adds to already standards. We are developing, as I said, templates, etc., to help people understand where the changes are. We're working with the industry to ensure that everybody's aware of these. So if you're working with your vet on your health plan going forward, that they know what it needs to include, the elements that it needs to include, because we're all in this together is probably how we would say it. My next couple of slides. The next, we do take feedback from assessment visits, and we do look at what the non-conformances are. Debbie, who's co-presented with me this evening, has done some work on this. We've pulled together the tops, probably the wrong word, but the most common non-conformances that are being seen on farm and how we can help address these, structures within the dairy in good order, housing, dairy cleanliness and hygiene. It does possibly surprise people that it's not paperwork based, aren't the biggest problems that we see on farm. The most number of non-conformances, it does come from cleanliness and maintenance side of things, maybe more than anything. So that's on they're all on the website. I've mentioned many times that we're producing templates. There's templates available. They are available from the Red Tractor Assurance website. That's the web address. But if you do go on the Assurance site, look, there's the screens with the photos on, and it says preparing for an audit. On there, there's the checklist, there's the different templates, etc., to help you along the way. And if you do have any questions, there's my email address. By all means, do drop me a line, and I will send across what I can or what we've got available that may help you. That's it from me, Debbie. Go on, Debbie, go for it.
Hello, everybody. It's me back again. We've had some questions. First of all, one question that came in to me and something that Kate just finished on about the templates. We are in the process of updating all the templates to reflect the changes. So just so that you know, the commitment is that we will have all those done and good to go by this time next week. Just to kind of add the clarity to that. So I'm going to just fire a couple of questions to Kate that she will be able to answer fairly swiftly. So the first one came in: if we record the temperature of wash and times, is a wipeable board with a few weeks of data enough, or do we need to keep longer term paper logs?
If this one is relating to the actual wash protocol, what we're saying is how the protocol actually occurs. So if you're saying that you do fortnightly checks, etc., of the wash temperatures, etc., that's fine. This is not about you keeping a log of that you're doing it. It's about the protocol being in place to ensure that we minimise residues from the chemicals, etc. As I said, there will be a template which will give all that guidance about what you need to record, not just record, but what you need to think about within that one.
Next question is, will AMB1, which is relating to training, will it continue to be assessed on a rolling 3 years going forward?
This is one of the discussions that the Technical Advisory Committee and the wider Red Tractor Board are having. It is worth noting that this is now a full standard, or will be a full standard from the 1st of October in the dairy standards, but it's still a recommendation in the beef and lamb standards. Will it be on a 3 year? We're working with the industry to obviously look at what changes might occur with regard to medicine use and the like going forward. So as I said, the next big, I probably haven't said, the next big standards change is actually 2021. So it will sit until 2021, that the date of October 2016. So you've got a 5-year period there. I wouldn't like to second guess what will happen in 2021. It will depend on what's happening in the industry and what the medicine regulations tell us we have to do or provide, etc.
Next question, I think Kate actually covered this in the presentation, which is who is providing such training other than veterinary services. And we did have a comment from a listener that to clarify that AHDB do organise courses for farmers on medicine handling with using a local vet, and they commented that it's generally fairly cost effective, but I'll let Kate expand on that.
Yeah, as I said, there is, and it is mentioned within the standard changes, there is the Lantra NOAA training courses, there is City and Guilds training courses. Mentioned earlier that a lot of vets and pharmaceutical companies are delivering them, and they do come to us to check the training setup beforehand to make sure it's covering everything we need to do. There is also, as mentioned, Milk Sure, which does cover all the elements required to do, and that if your milk buyer requires you to do that, does actually cover two things at once. So if your milk buyer requires you to do a Milk Sure course and stay Milk Sure accredited, it also does cover off the medicines training side of things.
Another question, slightly changing the subject. If you employ somebody on your unit whose English is not first language, the question was, will any written wash instructions, and I guess we could say any other instructions, not just regarding to wash instructions, do they need to be in the native language, given that they might not have English as a first language?
So on this one, I will refer to all policies on farm for this. You as a farmer or as a member have a responsibility to ensure that it's not seen as a tick box exercise, it's a working policy on that for your farm. So if you actually if you are employing staff whose English maybe isn't first language, or maybe don't have the same reading skills, you have to ensure that any policies you have on farm are understood by your staff. Again, that is a standard within the documentation, within the standards, that people understand the policies, etc. So does it need to be in another language? That's you as a member need to make that decision about what works for your farm. We as Red Tractor aren't stating what standards it must be into. So
another question, which is quite a good one and a not good one to clarify: is mobility scoring a must now?
Thanks, Tom. Tom, who is a vet, knows my love of mobility scoring. Unfortunately, it's not a must now. It is a must that you must have details within your herd health plan about your foot care policy, if you are using mobility scoring, how often it's undertaken, how you are determining which cows are lame, etc. Now, we know some milk buyers do say it's a must, but we're saying it's within the policy. We as I just said earlier, we never want any of the standards to be seen as just a tick box exercise. They should be living elements of what actually occurs on that farm.
Next question, if you are employing your local vet to carry out dehorning as part of a young stock service, are you still required by animal to detail in your records the pain relief used, etc., to carry out that process?
You can put it as batches within your medicine records, regardless of who does the process. It should still be in your medicine records that those animals have had those stock, but you can put it as a batch rather than individual animal record.
So I think that answers that one quite clearly. Next one, is it going to be compulsory for calves disputed with a hot iron and local anaesthetic to receive anti-inflammatory at the same time?
Interesting use of the word compulsory. These are the standards. Where it's not a standard that all stock must receive an anti-inflammatory. Again, it is good practice. We are having discussions with our technical advisory committee at the moment about young stock practices, and like I said, I wouldn't like to second guess what might come in 2021. If the will of the technical advisory committee and the industry is that we do make it compulsory that anti-inflammatories are used, it is possible. I say I wouldn't like to second guess. It's not in the October 2021 standards.
Next question, records must be kept for parlour cleaning, dilutions, protocols, etc. Do you also need to keep this info for automatic washing bulk tanks?
Thanks, Helen, for that one. Not currently. It was one of those that went out to consultation to the TAC, whether we covered both tanks and parlours. It's already in the standards that tanks must be maintained. And that's not just an annual service, but also the checks are made of the tank, etc. So it's not currently, the bulk tank is not covered within this at the moment, within the requirements for the plant protocol washing. Again, watch out for 2021.
Next question, can young calves be individually penned rather than in pairs if it is thought to be necessary as part of the Johne's control plan? That's a good question. Excuse the phone.
This is discussion with your vet. Obviously, within the standards, I know some milk buyers do say that calves have to be paired within the standards. We say they have to have tactile contact, but should a disease risk be discussed with the vet, and the vet says that calves should be individually penned, then that is justification for those calves to be individually penned and not have tactile contact. But as the standards read, individual pens are allowed as long as those calves have tactile contact and sight of one another.
Another question, do we need to record the washing off of a calving aid?
No. Within the protocol, we'd expect you to say that, you know, it would be disinfected after use, what it been disinfected, where it would be stored, etc. But we wouldn't expect you to keep a record of each time that it's been washed.
Quite quick and easy question to that one. Another question around the emergency plan. So what would be a suitable plan for us to detail should we have loss of assurance status?
So things that we need to consider within that one is what you would do with your milk, both if it was a short-term loss of assurance status, so you know, where would you dump it to, but also if it was a longer-term one, you know, longer-term, what volume would you be able to put in the slurry store, etc. So it's thinking about that, and also if you lost your assurance status for cattle, maybe if you're on a you were currently selling into an assured line, and what you would do with them. So yeah, it's thinking about those different things. If what volume of milk you'd have to dump and where it would go to.
Another question, do requirements for attendance on medicines courses apply to beef and sheep farmers or just dairy farms?
At the moment, we haven't made any changes to the beef and lamb standards this time round, so it's still a recommendation within the beef and lamb standards. It's become a full standard in the dairy standards. Again, 2021, it will come. I think that's the one thing I can say without losing my job. But
back to mobility scoring, is automated mobility scoring acceptable?
If it's within your herd health policy, that's what occurs and what you do with that data. Yeah, if you've got a force plate and you're doing that type of mobility scoring, or you're using mobility monitors, if it's in your health policy, that's fine. You know, it's about using the data and making sure we haven't got a lot of lame cows about.
I can answer this one. Next question to give Kate a break. What date are the standards actually available to see online or in hard copy? So the standards are online right now. They always are. They always have been. And the hard copy booklet that you would get from your certification body is only published when we do a whole scale standards review. So typically every 3 years. We don't publish those, republish them every time we make a change to the standards. The cost would be prohibitive. But what we do is we host on our website a document which is in addition to the main body of the standard document, which will detail all the changes. That is already on the website now for the changes coming on the 1st of October. The idea is that you have that document would sit alongside your hard copy. If you have a hard copy on your desk, which would be from October 2017, you would sit the document which details all the changes since 2017 alongside that. So they're already there.
Thank you. Tom has pointed out, point of clarity, there is no withhold period. He's quite right on teat sealants, but there is a requirement that milk from new calved cows does not enter the tank for human consumption. Again, it's one of the standards is about checking that milk is fit for human consumption, and there is a time period where after post calving that milk can't enter the food chain.
Another question, is non-compliance going to occur if review not 12 months in? By that I assume Tom means annual vet review.
It's a very difficult one to retrospectively fix, but yes, it should be an annual vet review is what we are asking for. As you're all aware, the standards are actually assessed every 18 months, but we are saying that the annual vet review is an annual. Obviously, certification bodies will potentially give a little bit of wiggle room. You know, we're not saying to the day, but it would expect to be an annual review.
Thank you. Thank you for answering that, Kate. And we've had another question asking if this webinar is going to be available to view in its entirety. We have recorded the webinar and it will be available on our website. And I will also send the link out by direct email to all the dairy scheme members for whom I have email addresses for.
Those of you that have attended, I will and asked for it, I will put this together as a slide deck and send it across as well.
I've had a last minute question just come in before we sign off. Kate might want to give some clarity on this. So will an inspector, assessor I should say, arrive on farm after the 1st of October, assess past history on the new standards? And I think this is a question that lots of our scheme members regularly ask.
Yeah, so it's as I mentioned on the antibiotics failure, you know, if you have an antibiotic failure from the 1st of October onwards, it has to be, the vet has to be informed about it. If you have your annual review and the date of your annual review is signed before the 30th of September 2019, they will not be assessing against the new standards for the content of that herd health plan. If it is signed on the 2nd of October, we would expect all those elements to be included. The assessor would expect those elements to be included within that health plan. The assessors, all the dairy assessors that we have with the different certification bodies, underwent a similar torture back in August. They had to have a webinar with myself and Debbie to ensure they were up to date with the standards. And we did, with them, we actually explained how they would expect, what they'd expect to see, and when a non-conformance could and should be raised. We've also had given them a little bit more further guidance on that as well. But if you are, if your assessment visit is after the 1st of October and you've had your annual health review done before and signed before that, the inspector will not, the assessor will not be raising non-conformances against that. We're aware of the fact that the annual declaration for Johne's is due around a similar time. So if you've got last year's signed one that's still within a 12-month date, that would be accepted. You want to expect to have another one signed 11 months later, etc. So I hope that answers that question, James.
Thank you, Kate. I hope everybody has found that useful. As I said, the questions are great. We've had quite a few questions. It's great to have a direct, question and answer session. I hope you found it useful. As I said, all the templates, and make a commitment to everybody that they will be all updated. It's work in progress at the moment. It's quite a sizable job alongside the other parts of the day job. So we make that commitment to have those all good to go by this time next week. And the webinar will be online for you to review and watch at your leisure. I think all that's left for me to do is to say good evening, and once again, thank you very much for your time.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Just